Why do I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it?
Ooh, Lord. What do we do about it?
Well, we said that we're going to interrogate some whiteness. We're going to talk about what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I think that that's critical for us to, I mean, we've been doing that in this conversation.
Yes.
We've been interrogating a whole bunch of things, but there's an opportunity to talk about a group that you're participating in. And I'm going to be fully transparent about us having this conversation while we're on this trip to South Carolina, which is another thing that was illuminated in the space, the opportunity for us to spend time together and then get to a place where there can be some reflection on experiences that we've had throughout the course of our relationship where we didn't take the opportunity to actually check in with each other. And one of these things, while we were on the trip, Diane was supposed to attend and participate with one of the groups that she's a part of. And so I'm going to pass it over to you to do the storytelling about that.
Yeah, so I was a part of a group, an organization that the intention was to gather people together in an organizing space to try to affect change, specifically geared around gun violence and how that impacts children. And I rose in the organization to a level where I was a part of the core group. And I was operating as a operations kind of person. So I was managing communication. We had about roughly 2,000, 2,500 people in the group, nationwide and some international. And it was led by a very dynamic human being. You wanted to say something, so I'm going to.
What was the demographic of? I did want to just clarify what the demographic of the group was. So I'm hearing that the focus of the coming together was for young people, and it was national and a little international. But who is the demographic? Like, who are the people that are doing this work?
Predominantly women. I don't know exactly what the numbers were of the full collective, but I'm going to say predominantly white women. There were men in the group. There were white men, and there were also men of color. There were women, Black women. There were Hispanic women who would identify. There were people that would identify as Southeast Asian. So it did have diversity to it, but again, I don't know the actual number, but there was, I would say, majority white identified humans that were in it. And it was led by a person who was a very dynamic personality, who was a non-white human. And this person was very raw and very open about their intention to call white people in and try to make a change in whiteness and how it moved through space and presented to the world. So what I have now come to realize, it would classify as a high demand group. So there was a lot of demand for the way we showed up in the space. And a lot of that was really good. One of the things that came out of this collective were interrogating whiteness book clubs, which I am still a part of one. And we read books that are going to challenge us in our perceptions of the world, usually from authors that would not identify as white. But we also are very intentional about how we come to the book club space. We've just finished creating a charter with some guardrails around making sure that because it's only white women in the group. And so we noticed through practice that we could get very comfortable and not interrogating whiteness in each other when it showed up, because we started to like each other. We became friends, and then it becomes this sticky wicket to call somebody in if you're, as white women will do, well, we're friends, so now I'm not going to call you in on your shit. So the group, this particular group, self-identified that we needed some help in that regard. We needed to do something different. And we stopped what we were doing in terms of the book we were reading and worked together to create this charter with this intentionality behind it and implement new practices. But that's only in my interrogating whiteness group. That's not in the larger group. So that I'm sharing with you when we were in Charleston that I left this group. I don't even know how long ago it was now, probably mid-year last year, 2025. And when I left the group, it was it had become a very hurtful and harmful place for myself as a white person. And then other white people that were also in the group left at that same time. And I realized when we were in Charleston that I had never shared that full story with you. And there was,
but I was around while you were going through all of this.
You were. And I think I mentioned it a couple of times on the aside. I'm like, I need to fill you in on how this went down. And then life was lifing and we never had that conversation. And because my exit from this group was so painful and fraught, there was a part of me that just didn't want to address it, didn't want to go there again, because it was a really difficult situation to go through when I went through it. So there was some, I just wanted to go away.
Put it away. The thing that you told us to do.
Yeah. There was part of it was that for sure. But what struck me when I was sharing this with you when we were in Charleston, what struck me was and you can, I don't mean to speak for you, but this was my perception of how you responded, was your sadness at the fact that
fear, not just sadness, fear.
Okay, fear. Better word. Thank you for that.
Because that's much more intense.
Yeah. That there were roughly 2,000 humans, white identified humans in the U.S. and in neighboring countries that had invested an enormous amount in this group. The group got shut down with very little explanation, very little details. I knew what the details were because I was in the core group, but for anybody else that wasn't, they had no idea. They just knew it was gone. They knew somewhat of the story leading up to its dismantling, but they really didn't. They were kind of left with just this, what the hell just happened kind of moment. After spending so much time in spaces with the leader of this organization, being berated and told that we were horrible humans, that we would never be safe, that we were always going to be harmful. And I was identifying when I was telling you all of this, that this is where some of my hypervigilance of not causing harm comes from, which is not a bad thing entirely. But the way I had internalized it into myself was this enormous amount of, I had almost been programmed to just berate myself in my own head, because I had been told so many times that I was this horrible human that would never be redeemable and would always be harm-inducing and harmful. So the fear that you expressed when I told you all of this, you were like, oh my God, and there are 2,500 white people out there that thought this. What the hell?
We do not need no more of that. Not when most of y'all voted for Trump. No, it's not. Yeah. We don't need any more of that.
I know.
We need white women to be able to interrogate the way that they're showing up in the world and in their minds, but then also to be, and I'm going to say this over and over, it might sound like a broken record to some people, but to remain in your dignity and your human dignity. Your experiences, whatever privilege or whatever the case may be, does not disclude you from being a human. And if you can't connect with your own human connectedness because somebody is telling you that you're not human, how are you going to connect with another human that is outside of yourself? That doesn't make any sense. But before I go off, let me calm down and back up, and then because that's how I feel about it. But the question that I have for you is, what in participating in this group, what were you hoping for? So that's the first question. And then the second question that I have to ask is, let me just ask the first question and then we'll come to the second question. Let's just do it that way.
What was I hoping to gain?
What were you hoping for in participating with this group? Yeah. No. But I mean, I know that the focus was to help children. I know that the focus was to help children, but the deeper question that I'm asking is, you know that you're coming together and you know that you're working with this dynamic woman that has a specific orientation to how white women show up. And then finding that out and you remaining in that group, what need was being filled by that? That's the first question. Like the depth of the question, not the depth of the question.
So for clarity, I think I said she was not white-bodied, but she was not a Black woman either. And I feel like that's important to express just for context.
Right. What is the context of that, saying that she's not a white woman and not a Black woman? So why is that context?
I think because I want to share that she was a person who had an understanding of how whiteness can be harmful. And yet she was also a person who had an understanding of how her own internalized anti-Blackness had been harmful in the past. And so the origin of the organization was to help children, but it became about how to unpack anti-Blackness and how to be more anti-racist. That was what the group really became about. And in that space, she exhibited an enormous amount of anti-Blackness while she was accusing all of us of being the most horrific humans on the planet. And so it was not only
what I want to acknowledge, I'm cutting you off. I'm sorry, because I want to acknowledge that you're saying that this is how you experienced it, not so much what she was doing. You're not talking about what this woman was doing. You're talking about I experienced that. I'm seeing there's an anti-Blackness, and I'm seeing a person who should understand anti-Blackness. And so as a white woman, and I want people to contextualize this, because especially if you're a white identified human being, contextualize all of the internal conversation that's happening. And I can say this because we already had the conversation. We're just having the conversation now on the podcast. But as I was listening, I was mortified because as a Black woman, I was really feeling the US is doing this right now. White culture is doing this thing that I'm seeing you express, that you experience in this organization. And we are being impacted by that. And so it's very important to hear how this went down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So the energy around my experience, as I experienced the accusations of anti-Blackness and the accusations of never being safe, never being, and that we always have to be interrogating, we always have to be breaking down. In the time that I spent in this organization, which was about a year and maybe a little bit more, it really became a programming of that I would never be safe, that I would never be better at doing at unpacking my own anti-Blackness, and that as a white woman, my dignity and my sense of humanity was completely inconsequential to any conversation, which felt very familiar because I've been in abusive marriages before. And so the dynamic of every time I'm in space with this person, I'm being reminded of how less than I am, of how dangerous I am, of how, blind I am, of how, all of these things that I was constantly experiencing constant reminder of. And this human she did not pull any punches. She would straight up say, you all are the most dangerous people ever, ever, ever. And I am putting myself in danger just being in space with you. That was a message that we got pretty much anytime we were with her. And there were people that left, there were people that couldn't handle it and left. And then there were many of us that stayed. And again, I know I'm painting with a broad brush, but my experience was I stayed because I thought that's what I needed to learn. I thought that I needed to unpack that I needed somebody who was going to be completely honest with me and tell me how fucked up I was. And what I didn't realize was that constant messaging was having a similar effect to me that my abusive marriage had, which was to break down my self-esteem completely, break down my ability to even trust myself. I was constantly like trying to convince myself that I was still doing the work. I'm still going to do the work. I'm still going to be that good white person, even though I was being told every time I was around her that that wasn't possible. I was never going to be a safe white person. And if something happened to me as a result of, you know, she wouldn't care because I'm just another white person who has caused all of this harm, and I'm not redeemable, and I'm not worth wanting to be redeemed. And yet that was the focus of this group. That became the focus of this group, was white people need to get with the program, and white people need to do this differently. And we need to unpack all of those things, which are not bad messages.
No, those are things that need to happen.
Packaging that it was coming in that was so destructive.
And so one of the things I'm curious about then is, can you hear me? You can hear me?
Yes. Yes.
It's a little delayed. Okay.
No,
but one of the things I'm curious then is like, what is the most effective ways to interrogate whiteness? Like, because you had this experience, if you were going to create a program to support people in interrogating whiteness, you need for that to be effective, to be successful?
Well, I don't know that I totally know the answer yet because it's a work in progress. But what has really struck me in my conversations with you about this, when we talked about it in Charleston, but then also too in these most recent episodes, is the dignity piece. It's the human dignity. I think part of the reason why it's been so easy for me to just cut people off if they think that the genocide of Palestinians is an okay thing. I don't have time for you. That's really a similar way that she was approaching white people. And I think I internalized that on some level. And so you're showing me that just in your speaking into human dignity, that I'm not a lost cause, that just because I am a white person who grew up in immense privilege and who, you know, is probably not going to be racist because I was indoctrinated into all of this, that I still have worth and I still have value, and that my constant intentional unpacking of this, while also being in tight relationship circles with people who are non-white, is an okay thing. It's worthy of my respect for myself, my self-respect, and respect of others. You know, I'm not asking for a pat on the back of what I'm doing, but that's where she would go, is that immediately if you wanted to say, well, I'm trying and I feel like I'm doing better, oh my God, Katie bar the door. It would be all about, you're just trying to center yourself and you're just trying to make yourself all about this and that and the other. And it was like, you know, after hearing that for as long as I did, I didn't know how to separate myself. What the messaging she was giving me was internalizing so much that I was telling myself that I was irredeemable and that I can't ever be trusted, and that I would never be okay, and all the things. So, and what I got in touch with it when I was talking to you about it in Charleston and unpacking it a little bit was just I was ready to just be gone with it. You know, I was like, I don't want to, I'm done. I'm out. I had a long conversation with a white woman who was also in the core group. After I separated from the group, she called me in, wanted to talk to me about how I was leaving the group, and basically, and I was coming from a place of just I statements. I was just saying, this is how this is landing on me. This is what I need to do for my own personal health, because I do believe that that's all I can speak to is what's going on in my own head. And all I kept getting was, well, all I'm hearing is you're centering yourself. All I'm hearing is that you're not paying attention to anybody else. It's just me, 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 me. And I'm like, that's all I can speak to is my lived experience. I can't speak to anybody else's. And so the end of the conversation was, well, I just hope you're not going to be one of those white women that turn in your neighbors to ICE. That was her parting salvo, that she had already decided that I was going to be one of those white women because I left this group and didn't want to be berated every minute of every day by this leader. And she was a white woman who I feel like is still, I don't know if she's still in those trenches, if she's still in that relationship with that person and still buying it. I mean, she made some really big life choices in her life that were guided by this person who was leading this group, and they were massive ones. And, my
I'm
heart
glad
goes
that
out.
you brought that up, because that's really what I want to focus on in this conversation. Let's go back to, like, what is a effective way, right? And we can have this conversation on a global scale and thinking about how folks are having the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, having the conversation about genocide, having the conversation about where US has the right to aggress, which is nowhere, in my opinion. But a normal, and I'm thinking about this from a developmental psychology component, and both of us have spent time helping young people to develop. You worked as a director of a youth program. I've been a surrogate mother, foster parent, all of the things to help young people as well. And we know that discipline with young people is more effective when you are acknowledging behaviors, where you are giving consequences, where you have to make amends for the behaviors that you do.
Right.
Rather than whipping on somebody, beating on somebody, always shouting at them the negative things, because their responsiveness to that is going to be to develop a defense mechanism, whether healthy or unhealthy. And what we are seeing in the US right now, after there has been a call in of all of the lies and the misinformation and the storytelling of the celebration of, like, the inception of the United States all the way up into this moment, and people are coming into the reality of the stories that we've been told are not the complete and total stories, and doesn't validate the humanity of all the people who participated in contributing to the stories. And that has been called in, very much like your experience. And the responsiveness to that is what we see in Project 2025, is what we see in what I would attribute to a bully perspective, pushing back because there's folks are saying we're not going to allow the bullying anymore. And the bully is like, I got to fight for my positionality any way that I can fight for my positionality. So that is the response from a US context, and some other places I've been in, from a Jamaican cultural context, you would dead a person. Yeah, I mean, how do we say, we can't say that on YouTube? We want to say that unalive a people, when they transgress you in this way. So I'm not saying that human responsiveness doesn't have a reaction when you're continually beat up on, but the way that we have an opportunity to respond is different. Your responsiveness was to cut it off and cut it out of your life. My offer is from a very restorative perspective, where I have a different way of thinking and experiencing the world than you do. I need to understand how you experience it. And I'm hoping that you would sit in a place where you'll understand how I'm experiencing my situation. And when we do that, then we can recognize each other's humanity. I've said this multiple times before, but I'm offering a different way of thinking about how we understand those who violate and harm us, and how do we then more effectively interrogate those things, so that when we're talking about celebrating 250 years of the United States, we also are telling the truth about the harm of the stories, so that we can acknowledge the behavior and then course correct the behavior, make amends for the behavior, and then continue true. Like, that is the goal. That is
Yeah.
like the North Star that we should be sitting in, and why we have to talk about when these experiences happen. I'm so passionate about this because as a Black woman, as a Black bodied individual, and I'm going to go to the biology of it right now, my body is at the same level of risk, in my opinion, in the United States as it would have been back in slave times.
Yeah.
That hasn't changed.
Right.
And until we can get that to change, we're not going in the right direction. There's nothing to celebrate, in my opinion.
Right.
And that's why I wanted to have a conversation. And I'm thankful that you chose us to have a conversation in the heart of the nation where all of these issues are really amplified, because I didn't experience the level of outward physical violence that we hear about, in Chicago or in New Orleans or in, the hood in Miami or whatever the case may be. I didn't hear about that happening in South Carolina, this very interesting status quo that is existing, that what I am visually acknowledging the United States is trying to recreate.
Well, that's what I've always said about, we can't change what we don't acknowledge, that this country, I mean, it's very impactful to hear you say that you feel that today your body is at as much risk as it was back during, before the war, during slavery times, before emancipation. And that is the truth of this country. And so we're headed into celebrating 250 years. And, a phrase that you said before we started recording this was, we don't want to celebrate it. We need to interrogate it. Why can't we find a space where we can interrogate what is true about the U.S. and the ills that it still perpetuates, so that we can make amends, so we can acknowledge it, so we can unpack it, we can make amends. And then, we talked in Charleston about the slavery, the apology for slavery that the Charleston City Council voted on, that took 5.5 hours to say yes to after over a year of working on it, and they still only got a yes, 7-5 vote. So it was a very slim margin.
And we're about to experience that again as democracy is being eroded and the 14th Amendment is shifting. You're changing what the vote is.
Because slavery is actually never gone away. It's been exactly. So it's been, for some folks it's been very blatant, and for other folks it's very hidden, but it's still there and it's still functioning. The foundation is all still there. All they got to do is flip a switch and it goes right back to, what we knew before. So the interrogation of whiteness, while I appreciate what I learned while I was a part of this group, to the point of becoming a part of this Interrogating Whiteness book club. Hey, y'all, there's some of them that listen, regular listeners. And, I'm very glad to be a part of this group. I'm very glad that this particular set of humans understands that we can get bogged down in our whiteness with each other and our friendship and not do the real work. And so when that happens, we're like, whoa, we got to stop and we got to change some things up. I really appreciate that. It might have gone a different way. We may have been a group that just was happy in our comfort. And so, we were reading books that were written by non-white authors, and we were talking about some stuff, but we weren't really getting, when our whiteness showed up, we weren't really calling each other in, which is the point of the book club. So I'm very appreciative that we're a part of this group. And I know there are still some Interrogating Whiteness book clubs going on as a result of this group that we were all a part of, which is a beautiful outcome of this, this situation that we all found ourselves in. And I'm sure that some of the lived experience of folks that were in this group may not look the same as the ones that I did. I do think that there's a difference between somebody who was a little bit more on the periphery and somebody who was in the core group. So there are good things that come out of everything, but there also was a lot of hurt. And to your point, there's an opportunity for some restorative practice to try to unpack some of that pain, so that those of us white women who walked away from that experience feeling a level of anger or resentment or pain or fear or all of the above, don't turn that.
Or look at
Don't
how
take.
those people behave. The other part of it is look at how those people behave. There's something that Malcolm X said: we don't air our dirty laundry out in public, because then that's used against us in trying to like elevate ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And so like if you have a whole bunch of white women that are looking at, look at these non-white people in leadership that are behaving like this, and we don't have to do nothing but sit here and watch them, and then look how everything falls apart. That's not cute. And there's too much harm. There's way too much harm in that. To lose people who were committed to transformation and then see a whole bunch of mess, and that might have them caution being in the journey towards transformation. There's too much harm in that.
And being in the journey of being in a space that's led by non-white folks. I mean, that was one of the reasons I was drawn to it, because as you know, from my experience of the organization that we worked with, I was like, I don't want to be in a predominantly white space anymore. I want to be in an organization led by people that don't look like me. So that was part of the draw. And I would dare say that was probably part of the draw for a lot of people. And then to have this person in particular, but other people, non-white people in the leadership core, it became an ego driven practice, and with intention to, and because the leader had always said, it can't be about me. It can't be about me. This is about, the greater intention of the group. This is about, it's not about me. Don't put me on a pedestal. They said that many, many, many times. And then when something popped off, it became all about them, and they shut it all down. And we were not allowed, as the core people, we're not allowed to tell anybody why it truly shut down. It was just, it's not safe anymore. We're out. And it left everybody with this hole, and all of us questioning, what did we do? And what could we have done differently? And we thought we were, we've been listening to her tell us for so long that we were all so harmful, that it was an easy place. I know I went there, and I wonder how many others went there, that it's all about me. I must have done something wrong. And that's why it all fell apart, which is typically where whiteness goes. But when that's not,
then that's
solved,
why South Carolina, and that's when the South Carolina makes sense, right? Because then white people get comfortable being with white people, where they're going to understand how it is that you're moving, and I don't have to interrogate myself. I don't have to question anything. And then when we see stuff like that, the impact of something like that is, I'm like, that's 2,500 more people that are like, I'm not voting for somebody in leadership that I saw these people in leadership, and I don't understand what it is that they did, and I don't understand why. If you think about it logically like that, then for those of us who are really trying to ensure that the United States, and that the United States culture models what the narrative storytelling says about, you can come to the United States regardless of your background, your heritage, and all of that. The story that's told is that you can come and you can be here, and you can exist in your humanity and dignity, and achieve whatever goals you set for yourself. For us to actually get to a United States that looks like that, and that does not transgress other communities, and that also helps other communities that have less resources, for us to be the kind of nation and the kind of country we need those who sit in positions of power not to look at those who are non-white in leadership in funk and mess, because all it's going to do is reinforce this is why we don't allow this. And if there's a whole bunch of white people who are having that experience, and it's not addressed, and it's not course corrected, it's not healed. If it's not healed, then those of us who are non-white humans are going to continue to be in trouble. Troubler. Can't even get the word out. But it's really not.
Troubler. I love that. Yeah.
And if we're going to celebrate anything, we want to be celebrating the transformation and us actually achieving the kind of nation that we want to exist in.
Yes. Yes.
Boom.
Amen.
What do I give
Thanks for joining us. Until next time, as you move throughout your day, continue to ask yourself,
Why Do I Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.